All right. Welcome, everyone. My name is Lynn Kinst. I'm the Executive Director of the Hemophilia Council of California. We want to welcome you to our Advocacy and Policy webinar. Tonight's topic is Speak My Language, Understanding Health Insurance. So just briefly wanted to introduce you to the Hemophilia Council of California if this is the first time you're joining us. Our mission is to improve access to care and treatment options in order to advance the quality of life for people with bleeding disorders through advocacy, education, and outreach in collaboration with our founding member organizations. So really the council focuses on health policy and health care access. We deal with a lot of insurance issues, which is why we're going to discuss that topic this evening.
So when we're talking about private plans, it's important to remember that not all private plans are created equal. One thing about health insurance providers or health insurance plans is, much like the government, they love using acronyms. And so I wanted to start with some of the most important acronyms and definitions for you to know. And basically those begin with, the types of health plans that you may be able to purchase, whether this is through the marketplace or the individual market, or like I said, a lot of employers will offer more than one type of plan. So just so that you can understand what those are, an EPO is what they call an exclusive provider organization. These seem to be being used quite a bit these days. It is a managed care plan where services are covered only if you use doctors, specialists, and facilities within their network. The big difference between an EPO and an HMO, which is a health maintenance organization, which health maintenance organizations have been around forever. I think my very first health insurance plan when I got my job was a HMO. The big difference is with an EPO plan, you often are not required to obtain a referral to see a specialist. If you're someone who's ever been in a health maintenance organization or an HMO plan, one of the great things about it was they seem to have, lower co-pays, lower out-of-pocket costs. But the problem was you had to be inside their network. You had to use the doctors in their network, or you had to get a referral to see someone out of network or to see a specialist, which, as you know, a lot of times you don't necessarily know you're going to need that until you need it. And sometimes it takes a while to get those referrals approved or those out of network exceptions made. So again, HMOs, if you're in an area where all of your doctors are in the same network, it can be a great option because it may be less expensive. But if you have the option of an EPO, it's usually a little bit more flexible. So the next slide, please. High deductible health plans, these are being utilized a lot more than they used to be, especially in self-insured employer plans. So let me give you a good example. If you work for the state or you work for the county, or let's say you work for a university or a school system, a lot of them will have a they're self-insured entities, which means they may use a company that you recognize the name, like an Anthem, a Blue Cross. They use them to process all their claims, and they use them to utilize their network of providers. But it's not really the insurance company that's paying the cost. It is the employer themselves. So they're kind of writing the check, and we're going to talk about why that can be difficult. So a lot of self-insured employers are pushing high deductible health plans. And the reason for that is there's a belief that if they make you think harder about, if you know that you're going to have to come out with more money up front, you may make different choices in getting a medication or service. For example, maybe that means you'll get a generic instead of a name brand product. Of course, for us and hemophilia, there are no generics. So, I would say to you that as an advocate, I typically did not encourage people with chronic disease to choose a high deductible health plan, because you know you're going to hit that cost. You know you're going to hit it pretty much every year. Really, a high deductible health plan will give you a lower premium, but it's good for someone who is not sick, who's not going to utilize a lot of services. Otherwise, you will find yourself paying a lot of money upfront out of pocket. So then you have a preferred provider organization. This is one that is going to offer you the most flexibility. It could be more expensive. The premium might be higher. And in some instances, maybe even some of the copays are higher. But it offers you the most flexibility. And what I mean by that is, if you use providers within their network, you will have a lower copay, a lower cost share, but you do have the ability to go outside of the network. That just means typically in most of those cases, you'll pay maybe a higher copay or a higher coinsurance. The other plans I talked to you about, an HMO and an EPO, if you go outside of the network, a lot of times you have zero coverage for those charges. The exception being if it's an emergency. But what I like to say is the health plan gets to decide if that's an emergency. And, it's interesting, if you read some of their language, you'll be like, in the event of the potential for loss of life or limb, well, I can personally think of a lot of other things that seem like emergencies that are not quite that severe. So if you're looking for flexibility, and I would say, if you're someone who, let's say you and your family travel a lot, or let's say with your job, you travel a lot, a PPO might be a better option for you, because the chances of you getting sick somewhere away from home, out of network, are going to be higher. So you have to kind of look at your individual lifestyle when you're making decisions about which insurance plan is best for you. So,
Hey, Michelle,
yes.
you might be coming to this, but as we think about in-network and out-of-network, how does that relate to a hemophilia treatment center?
Well, I would say to you that, with the exception of integrated health plans, which in California you have Kaiser, which is one of the biggies. There are several other like that around the country. But what we have found is that most often we find that hemophilia treatment centers are covered and are in most networks, at least for the medical services. Now, again, Kaiser's an exception. And it also depends on which state, which Kaiser plan that you're in. Sometimes they will let you be seen once a year at an HTC, but then they want to manage your care after that. And they may do that in collaboration with your HTC. But I would say to you that I always tell people to look and see if your HTC is in network. And then, even if it looks like they are, and you're going to hear me say this when I talk about the documents that you review, even if you look and you go, oh, great, my HTC is in network, always call the health plan you're going to go with and ask them again, and ask them where you can find that in your health plan, and ask them. I always, go for the gusto here and say, can you send me that in writing? Can you confirm for me that that's in writing? At a minimum, when you call your insurance company to ask a question, or an insurance company, you want to get the name of the person you're talking to. You want to write down the date you called, and you want to write down the time. I sat on the board of the high risk pool in the state of Indiana for 20 years. And I'm sure you've all seen this, where you call into, an insurance company and one of the recording will say, this call may be recorded for training purposes. Yet it always seems like when you call and you get an answer, and if you haven't gotten it in writing, and let's say you get a denial and you call back and you say, well, I called and I talked to somebody and they told me and say, and I'll say, and I know it said that that the calls would be recorded. Almost always it seems like they say, oh, well, not all those calls. No, this one wasn't recorded. Until you say to them, it was on this day at this time, and here's who I talked to. And the reason I say that I served on this board is I learned that they record everything. They do record everything. So if you're able to tell them that, the chances of them going, oh, yes, we see, are going to be better. If you don't see your HTC and network, I think it's important that you look at it both as the name of the HTC and the name of the provider. Sometimes it's in just under the provider's names, not under the HTC name. I will say that not all health plans include the HTCs in network for providing you factor. Again, that's another question that I'm going to get to, that I'm going to explain to you how to ask those questions when you're making your decision. And again, it never hurts to ask, is there any possibility for exception? Always be willing to ask that.
Want to thank our sponsors as well, who make this webinar series possible. And just thank you again, Michelle, for joining us tonight, for all the great information. And thank you all for sticking with us as we went a little over tonight. I hope that you found it helpful. Please do reach out to the council if you have any follow-up questions regarding your individual situation. We will do our best to connect you with the right people who can assist. I can always reach out to Michelle, and then we have great relationships with the folks at NHF and HFA, and the links that we talked about tonight, we will be sure to send out in our follow-up email as well. And the video will be available after we do a little bit of editing. So also wanted to thank briefly or say congratulations to Angel and Liz. Those are the community members who won our raffle tonight. So we'll be reaching out to you guys about those gift cards. And again, thank you all for joining us. And thank you again, Michelle.
No problem. Thank you. Everybody
have a good night, everyone.